Friends, peace be upon you. Welcome to Domus Trinitatis. Our new podcast series is about the Trinitarians, holy men and women, with Father Joes. I'm your host, Brother Allan. Good morning, Father Joes.
Good morning, brother.
How are you doing today, Father Joes?
Fine. It's great to be with you and to speak to some of our friends.
Thank you for agreeing to me to have this new podcast series about our Trinitarians, holy men and women. Would you like to also introduce yourself for our guests, who are listening and joining in, that they want to know who are you?
Well, officially, I'm Brother Jose. As being a priest, sometimes people wonder why you are a brother because that is our title in the order. As St. John the Matha was addressed as Brother John, and he wanted all of us, whether we are clerics or not, to be named as brothers. So that's why my brother Jose Narleli. I'm a Trinitarian this year. I complete 50 years of my first profession as a Trinitarian.
Wow, congratulations, Father Jose.
Thank you. And certainly I take pride in our founder in a very special way, and certainly all the holy men and women across the centuries. We have a wide spectrum of saints within our Trinitarian family. We have men saints, women saints, we have nuns, we have active sisters, we have laymen and laywomen, and the friars. What a beautiful family.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, whose saint are we going to talk today?
Well, I would like to present to you the figure of Saint John the Matha, the founder of the Order of the Holy Trinity and of the captives.
All right.
Well, first and foremost, as a young man, I was always attracted and very much inspired by the lives of saints. As an adolescent, as I used to read their lives, I was greatly inspired. And if I have a little bit of fervor and enthusiasm in my Christian discipleship, in my life as a religious and priest, one great factor has been the inspiration that I received from saints. And of course, each one in his way, in her own way, in her time was a great inspiration. And how could we forget a great benefactor of humanity such as Saint John the Matha, as you would come to know as I speak about this person and figure of Saint John the Matha. Who is John the Matha? John the Provençal, that refers to the region in South France from which he hails. He was born around the year 1150 in a region between the Alps and the Mediterranean. That particular part of France is called Provence, and his John Provençal was one of the way people in history speak about him. Being brought up in a very good family, and by the way, John the Matha was born in a very well-to-do family. He was in a wealthy family, which we know because he was not only an educated man, he not only received the liberal arts education, but he did further studies in theology at the University of Paris, the school cathedral, which was the most famous faculty of theology in Paris. He not only was a student there for 8 years, but he taught there as a master theologian. To be able to go to a university in the Middle Ages was the privilege of the few, not of many, and only those who had the means and resources could possibly aspire to study in a university. And so John the Matha was a well-educated man from a well-to-do family. He had all the means at his disposal to live a comfortable life. But from his very childhood, as some of the historical documents show, he had always a desire to enter in some religious order. And he was earnestly praying From the time he was a young man, the grace, the light to know what religious order he should join. And he was a man, a diligent student. He was a serious Catholic. He was a man of prayer, man of charity, and he never neglected any of his religious practices and devotion. So much so, while he was a student, they say he was subject to scorn because a university student taking seriously his religious practices, his fervor to attend the mass, his fervor to reach out to those who are needy, all this marked his life. And there is a document from the middle of the 13th century that is named Hoc Fuit Initium. And that particular document speaks about John the Matha, who desirous and eager to know God's will in his life. He wanted to do something for the Lord. He wanted to commit himself to a cause, but he wanted the light. And so he kept praying. Finally, he receives the light when he becomes a priest for the Diocese of Paris. And as he was celebrating his first Mass on 28th of January 1193, he received the answer from the Lord in the form of a vision. As he was in the most sacred point of that Mass, as he elevated the host, sacred host, he had a mystical experience of Christ seated on a glorious throne, flanked by two captives. One a European, a white captive or slave, the other one a dark or black captive representing the Moor of that times. And he was held, enamored. He was in an ecstasy. And this is counted for even by the Bishop of Paris and other important people like the abbot of the abbey of Saint Victor, an important abbey at that time, and Pravostin, one of the great philosophers and theologians, who himself was a mentor to John the Math at university. They were all present, and they say they also had a glimpse of the vision John had, and they roused him from his ecstatic experience, and he continued to celebrate the Eucharist. And at the end of the Eucharist, on enquiry, John revealed what he saw. This is what we Trinitarians consider as the original inspiration of our order.
Really beautiful, Father Jose. So Saint John de Matha celebrating the Mass and the vision appeared as like, we are born from the Eucharist to redeem. Beautiful.
Yeah, the Trinitarians, their mission, their vocation, all are centered on redemption. Redemption of captives whose faith is at stake, ransoming those who find themselves in difficulty to live their faith, to live their commitment to the gospel and to Christ. And today, in this day and age, when we think of all the dangers to which modern Christians are exposed to, what a beautiful vision, what a beautiful inspiration that John the Matha, a great learned man, receives a vision in the context of the Eucharist. Eucharist is the mystery of God's redemptive love for humanity. Every day, upon thousands of altars, from dawn to dusk, the holy sacrifice of Jesus' death and resurrection is offered and celebrated. It is infinite and merciful love of a God who comes in search of the one who is lost and one who is held captive. Upon receiving this answer to his prayers, what does John do? John retires into the woods about 80 kilometers northeast of Paris. Now we call that particular area Serpois. He returns or rather, he withdraws into the woods for what? To receive clarity of the vision. Mind you, St. John the Matha is known for his great work of redemption, going out in an adventurous and courageous way out into the shores of North Africa to negotiate with the Muslim leaders, the kings, and the governors, and to negotiate the ransom price for those Christian captives who were held prisoners there. And then, how did John the Matha end up doing that? How did he receive that clarity of vision of his mission? Through prayer. He is known to be a great redeemer. He is a co-redeemer with Christ, and the Trinitarians across the more than 8 centuries of our existence have ransomed thousands and thousands and thousands of Christian captives. And for this reason, the founder is known as a great benefactor of humanity. Although he is known for his redemptive role, we should not ignore the mystical role in his life. He was a man of profound prayer. And one of the things that modern men need today is to withdraw into our inner recesses. In the profound silence of our hearts, we must seek that clarity we need. Lord, what do you want me to do? Where do you want me to go? And that clarity is given in prayer. And that is what John the Matha did. In the hustle and bustle of the city life, urban life, John found it difficult to discern God's will for him. And so he withdraws, and there he finds a group of hermits. The leader of this group was later Saint Felix of Valois, who became the principal collaborator and co-founder of the order. But I want to bring to your attention how John discerned God's will. He was a man of discernment. He did not rush impulsively into any kind of execution of a dream he had, but a man who wanted the light from God. And that clarity in our life is so much needed. And that comes from cultivating silence, which is a prerequisite for effective prayer.
Really, I can remember that aspect of Saint John's life, Father Jose, and if it's not only his prayer, he's also very, he sees a lot of importance of the people who guides him, like the co-founder Saint Felix of Valois or the bishop and
The
the
abbot.
abbot of Saint Victor. They he considered their advice to him, their guidance in his journey in path of realizing the vision. So he really this discernment part is also praying, yes, but listening to people who are wise that can lead you to right path.
And the advice given by the hermits and their prayer together in the silence of the forest was a great factor of enlightenment for him. And I believe that John, learned as he was, he counted on the advice and he consulted wise and holy men who also came to his help. That is very true. Spiritual guidance, having spiritual mentors in our life is an important factor in this day and age. And then John's sensitivity to human suffering. A wise and learned man, he could have enjoyed the life and the prestige of a great professor in the university. But being exposed to the reality of the day, he was exposed to the plight of many slaves and captives in both Paris and in southern part of France in Marseille. And his heart went out to their plight, to their predicament. And John wanted to offer his life in service for this. And the important thing is that there After receiving the light from the Lord, he quits, he renounces his own personal project and plan. How important it is today. I think one of the common difficulties that we find today, even among the religious and priests, is that when you are asked to do something, when you are told to go somewhere, most of the time, one great obstacle is, I don't like that. I don't feel like that. But my plan was this, or I am interested in that. My preference is that. And there is also a great temptation to what we call entitlement. This is my right. This is my freedom. This is what I want. This is what my personal idea and project is. And that is a very common danger in spiritual life. But here is a man enlightened by God's message to him. He goes out. He renounces, he lets go of his personal plan and project to embrace the plan of God in his life. And his love for the poor, for the captive, for those who are hurting, those who are suffering, his compassionate love prompted him, and his discernment, his, his desire to conform his life to the will of God, made him give up that prestigious post at the university. And then, in the company of those holy men, he came out, they came up with the idea of founding a religious order to exalt and glorify the Trinitarian mystery, which had to be brought down to our day to day life in redemptive love. And then they come up with the idea, they were already living as a community, and with Saint Felix and John travels to Rome to, to get the approval of his plan or his dream or his vision of founding an order in the name of the Holy Trinity for the ransom of Christian captives. As he went to Rome and spent most of winter of 1197, the Holy Father wanted further confirmation of God's will in the life of John. John was sent back and get the confirmation of his plan with the concurring voice or the opinion of the bishop, the abbot of St. Victor. And he comes back with their recommendations, with their confirmation of John's plan. And then he goes back to the Holy Father. And then, I'm sorry, he made his first visit in May, but he went in December to Rome. And on the 17th of December 1198, Pope Innocent III gave the official approval to the order with the papal bull named Operande Divine Dispositiones, which approves the order of the Holy Trinity for the ransom of Christian captives. But one of the interesting things that the Holy Father mentions in the preamble to the rule of life that was approved is that John, my brother, or brother John, we having examined your project and having found out that you seek the interests of Christ more than your own interests, we approve this project.
I like that phrase, the interest of Christ. How relevant is it today in our world, Father? This phrase of seeking the interest of Christ.
I think all of us experience in our personal life the obstacle of self centeredness.
Mm-hmm.
Me, myself, and I. My likes, my interests, my personal desires. And that is what comes as a very recurrent obstacle in our spiritual pursuit of perfection, of holiness. And that is why we see the figure of a crucified Christ as the most inspiring for us Christians. Jesus who empties himself, So much so, even to the last drop of blood is shed for us. And the red and blue cross that we Trinitarians bear on our chest reminds us of that blood and water that flowed from the side of Christ. The blood is signified by the color red. It is also represents the divinity of Christ. And the blue, when the water in the when the sky is reflected in the deep waters, it looks blue. The water and blood that flowed from the side of Christ. And the blue also refers to the humanity of Christ. So these things come together to let us know that God, becoming man, emptied himself completely, surrendered himself into the hands of his enemies to redeem us. And why that kind of death? Emptying us of our selfishness or ego. That is one of the recurrent dangers. And so St. John the Matha, along with so many other holy men and women across the centuries, remind us that our first search is for Christ and his kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And then only, and at, to fulfill the realization of Christ's will, God's kingdom in our midst, we let go of our personal comforts and interests. This is how we can realize the perfection to which we are all called.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and I'm sure our listeners, are reflecting together with us as we have this conversation and reflect with the life of Saint John de Matha. But the act of self-emptying and seeking the interests of Christ is really a challenge for us on personal levels, because most of the time, as we experience it, we might start the journey and fail, as we move through, or we fell on the cracks of life, and instead of self-emptying, we put more things in our life that does not help us on this process of self-emptying.
And Christ who humbled himself to be one of us. And Christ who preached a message, you are all brothers. And this is beautifully reflected in the rule of life John the Matha has written, and that has been approved. And the word brother is mentioned 31 times in that short and simple rule of life. And one of the things we see that in the Holy Trinity there is perfect equality, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we are supposed to be equal among ourselves. Doesn't matter you have a university degree or not, you have more talents or less talents, you are a priest or not a priest, but we are all brothers. And this is one of the things that we find very obvious in the rule John the Matha said. And we also, that also the rule speaks about our simplicity and humility and poverty that Trinitarians have. Again, we empty ourselves of that, what you call prepotent or proud ego that always wants to be in the forefront. And that is the importance of humility. John the Matha, who was used to riding horses, in those days only noblemen could ride horses. He asked his brothers to ride only donkeys or mules in a great gesture of solidarity with the poor and with the less privileged in society. And so John the Matha is very particular to mention simple details as kind of food, kind of clothing we wear, and the way we travel. All speak about identifying ourselves with the poor and with the lowly, just like Christ did. And so, a man who could have had everything he wanted, humanly speaking, in that society, let go of that to be in solidarity with the poor and the suffering, not only with his gestures, but in his lifestyle. This is where I see John the Mathas also one of his great traits in this great man. champion of freedom. All those things, all the paraphernalia, all the frills of life, all the non essential things, all the luxuries and comforts that is beyond the reach of the common man, he renounces willingly. Why? Because they stand in the way of self emptiness, of being a humble servant. And this is one thing that strikes me. And if Franciscans are known for their poverty, and they are known, Trinitarians were known also for their poverty. But we embrace poverty not simply to honor Lady Poverty, but because we are stirred by the predicaments, the sad situation of privation of the poor and the suffering. They have so little. And how can I indulge in the lap of luxury when I see my fellow brothers go hungry or without clothing? And that is why there is an interesting expression in the rule called tertia pars. Inasmuch as all the sources of income, we Trinitarians are supposed to have two-thirds for their own self-sustenance and works of charity, and one-third is to be set apart at all costs for the ransoming redemption of the captives. Jesus who paid his precious blood to the last drop to redeem us. So John the Matha said, we should let go of some of our comforts to come to the rescue and liberation of our fellow brothers and sisters. What a great altruism. What a great charity we find. And for that reason, he asked his brothers to embrace a humble and simple lifestyle in solidarity with our fellow brothers who suffer.
Really beautiful, Father, because I remember that with the tertia pars, the first one is specifically for the redemption. The money collected is set aside for the redemption of the captives. Then the second one is the poor, and then the last portion, if ever there's something remained, as I remember in my studies in Rome, it was saying that's the for the brothers. So that this cycle of self-emptying for the sake of redemption is really very constant in the life of Saint John de Matha, and call to us who are Trinitarians to have that kind of self-emptying for the sake of redemption also.
And I think this speaks very loudly in the modern times. Why there is such a big chasm between the poor and the rich, between the poor nations and richer nations. There are people, a small group of people, owning and expending or spending a greater part of the resources of the earth, while a great part of humanity you know, goes hungry and suffer privations of the essentials in life. And the importance of solidarity and sharing is one thing that we find in the spirituality of St. John the Matha. You cannot remain ignorant. You cannot remain indifferent to the burning issues of the dire and stark needs of our fellow brothers and sisters. And if Christ came at the price of losing his life, surrendering his life, shedding his blood, allowing his body to be broken for us, which we celebrate in every Eucharist, as that we have to respond to the needs, the spirit of sharing, the spirit of solidarity is so important in this day and age because contrasts are great in the society. And if a Saint Francis, if a Saint Dominic, if a Saint John the Matha, they were raised at a particular time in history to challenge the times of their day. When there were problems in the society, in the feudal societies, and in the church, when prelates went prancing around with their great robes and great luxury, when there were abuses of all sorts, a Francis, a Dominic, a John the Matha exhort us today to return to the simplicity of the gospel and to let go of that ego centeredness, selfishness, that helps us hold on to our comforts, to our personal interests at all costs. And as a consequence, many of our fellow needy brothers and sisters continue in their in their great need of what is necessary for them. May the champion of liberty, may this great benefactor of humanity, may the mystic and prophet, as John the Matha was, inspire us to respond to the great challenges of the day and go back to the essential. Let go of personal interests so that Christ may be embraced and his gospel may be lived and spread.
Wow. Thank you very much, Father Jose. It's really wonderful for all the thoughts that you have shared with us. It's just so rich to hear from you and to to reflect together with you. And one thing I kind of catch me in the beginning is like Saint John de Matha was a serious Catholic, and with this seriousness, he really embrace his mission and his call to life to become holy. And from that holiness, he's called to redeem captives, like the par excellence example, Jesus Christ. He emptied himself and for our sake to redeem us. Beautiful. So that's our episode today. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening. And hope that you'll join us for more episodes. Until then, this is Brother Allan, OSST, your host. And don't forget, always seek the interest of Christ the Redeemer.
Have a blessed day.